For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Motshabi Hoaeane. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Thank you once more, Professor,
Thank
for your
you very
insights. You have repeatedly said that large numbers of people are disillusioned with formal politics, that government and the state may have been delegitimized in the eyes of many. How can this be addressed, rather?
It's quite difficult. You know, I think there's some people who formulate schemes sitting in their studies for how the problems of South Africa can be solved. They call it democracy B or something like that, or have some scheme. The problem with a scheme is that for it to work, you have to get people to associate with it. And let me start by the question of delegitimization. I think while there was a big focus on the state of the nation last week, large numbers of people were not really interested in that. And some people were a little bit, while they watched the fashion, they were a little bit cynical about the fashion parade. They also juxtaposed what President Zuma said in 2009 with what he said this year, for example, about roads in Mpumalanga and things like that. There's a sense of cynicism that what politicians say don't really mean much. And I think one of the problems is that at a certain level of society, when you have a problem, you try and raise it, and the people that you encounter are not the political leaders, whether at a local level or at a provincial or national level. You encounter the police. And I think we've got a problem in the society that when people are guaranteed rights under the Constitution, whether it's water, housing, health care, electricity, and these services, instead of being delivered, are being diverted in one or other way or falling into disrepair. When people raise it, there's a breakdown between the constitutional organs of government and communities. The political leaders don't face them. If you look at all these protests in Bekkersdal, Bronkhorstspruit, Madibeng, it took deaths before political leadership arrived. And very often people have not met the level of leadership that they've wanted to meet. So on the one hand, there has to be some form of connection between political aspirations, grievances, concerns on the ground, and representation. Now, we have got a very good constitution, and I would not be suggesting that that has been delegitimized. But I think it has been undermined in various ways and devalued because of politicians not carrying out in good faith their duties towards the public.
You have said that the extra-parliamentary terrain is a very significant place for political action. Can you elaborate on this?
Before elaborating on that, I want to say that we cannot abandon institutional structures and constitutionalism. The fact that they have not resourced some institutions, some constitutions properly, institutional structures properly, the fact that they have undermined NEDLAC, for example, does not mean that these institutions should not be refurbished and that we should simply go to extra-parliamentary. But having said that, I do believe that the terrain of civil society is very important, but civil society is not one thing. It consists, even business is part of civil society, but a very important role has been played by non-governmental organizations. For example, the litigation that was introduced with regard to schools, other litigation undertaken by NGOs. But we must draw a distinction between the different parts of civil society and the different types of NGOs. Some NGOs go into a troubled situation and they use their expertise, their resources, and they get lawyers who make a solution in the courts, and the community gets informed that this has happened. Now that solution is one where the community are really the recipients of the results of expertise. They're not part of resolving the problem. Other NGOs operate in consultation with communities. Community organizations like Abakhali in KZN, for example, when they relate to NGOs, they relate as an organized body which says to them, this is our problem. How can you make it go away, but what are the legal options? And they say, well, this legal option. They say, well, what about that? And they say, well, it's not legally possible, or we can frame our legal action in this way. So the communities and the experts are involved in resolving the problem. So that is very important to recognize that what civil society, when I talk about extra-parliamentary or civil society, we need to look for a solution or solutions that empower communities, so they're not simply voting every 5 years. But there are other ways in which communities can get involved in their own lives, in managing their own lives, because government does not cover everything, and not everything you want to do with your life need be done in relation to government. For example, cooperatives could be set up where women and men who have been retrenched or out of work did various things which ensured that they were productive members of society. Now in India, for example, you've had a number of cooperatives that have been developed, and over time these have become very big. There have been dairy cooperatives, for example, and while they started off independent of connection to the state, over time they decided to make that connection. So this is what I call popular self-empowerment, an example of popular power. But that popular power, as I indicated in the example from India, can relate to constitutional institutions, or they can remain independent.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about politics and elections in South Africa.